Hi, I'm Revis, and today I am sharing with you all one of my Infinite Conquest runs from the Infinite Conquest week. This was a week that I actually took a vacation from streaming, so I did the majority of my conquest off stream, and I did manage to get one in on stream, which I'll share later on the channel. This was the one that I recorded off stream. So what I'm going to do is kind of go through it, talk over my thoughts as I do similarly to the VOD videos. But what I really wanted to emphasize in this video was a lot about how you should prepare for Infinite Conquest, what types of decks you should bring, how you should play, what kind of mental, and this is all my opinion, but I think it really helps. These will be tips that really helped me. To give you some context on how my runs went, I had 5 infinite tickets. I actually had to give a bunch of gold tickets, which is fine. I had 5 infinite tickets. I was aiming to get 1 or 2 avatars was my original goal. So with my first 2 tickets, I played Bounce, and I went through 5-0, got 2 avatars from Bounce. And then I played 1 ticket with Sandman, which I lost in the first round. And then my final 2 tickets were with this Dracula High Evo Lockjaw build. Um, so yeah, I'll talk a little bit about like why I chose these decks. Obviously, these are some of the best decks in the meta, um, but I think there's more to it to that. To where in Conquest there's specific advantages you get running these styles. Especially, I want to talk about why I ran the Dracula build as opposed to the Killmonger build, which was more popular at the time when I was coming up with this. But yeah, for now, let's just go into the first game, and I'll talk about it a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, overall, we ended up with 4 avatars. I went 5-0 with both of the Lasha decks as well. But yeah, so we're going to the first game versus PJ. Um, okay, yeah. So I should talk about the Conquest decks, explain a little bit more. Um, but I think the first match is pretty important in Conquest because this is where we're trying to figure out our opponent's deck, right? So here I have Lockjaw Wasp. My opponent, I pulled an Odin for the Bugle, so originally I'm thinking that they're Lockjaw. They can also be Sandman, right? Those are 2 decks that run Odin. I've also been seeing Wong on reveal. That's actually what I lost to with my Sandman deck, and the one loss that I had in Infinite Conquest. But yeah, so we have Gamma Lab flip up here, so I'm not actually going to Lockjaw Wasp. I don't want 2 Hulks. I think I'm just going to hedge with 1 since if it's another Lockjaw deck or a Sandman deck, they can only usually play 1 card. So I figure I'll make that even, and I'll still get Lockjaw on the board. It's still very powerful. Um, so I do that. They play Electro. Now I know that they're the Sandman deck, which generally is favored into Lockjaw. I think I get a little bit more leeway with my build because I'm running Spider-Ham and Dracula. Dracula allows you to play around leader a little bit more effectively, and Spider-Ham allows you to hit some of their important combo pieces, like their Zola and their Odin, which is generally how they try to beat you. Yeah, so they go for the Sandman here, which makes my Jane pretty bad. So I decide to go for the Jubilee instead. I have some reasonable hits in my decks of Dracula and Chavez. Thor shuffles the deck, so I can pull Chavez off Jubilee too. But yeah, so in these first games, I generally am pretty passive with snapping because I'm trying to figure out do my opponents have like crazy tech cards? Are they running like weird versions of the deck? Right here, I find out that they have Dino, which isn't always in these Lockjaw decks. But yeah, so now here I did pull the Dracula. I have pretty big cards in hand. If I pull one of the 20 power units, I can win Washington, D.C. But at the same time, I'm only hit by 1 mid. They snap me here. Pretty risky to stay. But also, this is, like I said, this is a bad matchup. And that's one thing I do want to talk about when playing these types of games is that you do want to be more aggressive in staying and in snapping when you believe you're in a bad matchup. So I'm seriously considering staying here, even though I am a little bit behind. Playing Hulk here. I'm thinking about leader, I believe. Leader is very hard to beat. So yeah, I do decide to stay. They go for Zola on the dinosaur. um, which does lose some right lane, and my Hulk is big enough to win. Or sorry, loses them left lane. My Hulk is big enough to win right. So we do manage to stay. I stayed here purely because I think we're unfavored. And yeah, so the two things I was looking to play around there were Zola and like Doctor Doom or Leader. But the Dracula was a hit where it's like, it's pretty tough to stay. Like, it's pretty tough for an opponent to stay there with Dracula. But yeah, so let me talk about a little bit more. So when you're playing these games, right, so you're trying to figure out your opponent's deck, you should snap and play more passively if you believe that your deck is favored or even, right? So if you believe you have a higher than 50% win rate, you want to try and extend these games out, right? So that you can actually get less variance, right? If you have a longer set of games, there's going to be less opportunity for you to lose them, right? Or just like lose 8 cubes on a bad outcome. Similarly, you should play passively if you believe you're the better player. So if your opponent is doing really crazy stuff, not retreating later, retreating randomly in the middle of the games, you should take advantage of that and try and extend these games, since you should have a higher win rate overall. But yeah. So here, yeah, okay, also my opponent waves me. I play Jubilee to play around Leader. I still haven't seen that they have Leader, but it's generally something that you'd follow up with Wave, but they decided to go Sandman instead, which is okay. They don't put that much power down. I'm regretting not playing Infinite a little bit, because Infinite would have been very good into this. But since Titan is down, I can't play Hulk here, which is very big. Almost guaranteed to win the Nebula lane, since it will be bigger than any sort of Dino or anything else my opponent plays. Also, my opponent can't play into Foreman right now. They don't really have a good way to Zola, right? So they play Black Panther there, but they would not be guaranteed a Zola into Vormir. And they also would not win the Monster Metropolis buff versus the Hulk that way either. Yeah, so like I was saying, you want to extend the games if you have a if you think you have a higher win rate versus your opponent. And similarly, if you think you're unfavored, you should be snapping aggressively when you have your win conditions or good locations, and trying to get more cubes off of your wins than your opponent, right? So when I was playing Bounce, I actually ran into, out of the 10 games I played, I ran into 3 what I consider really, really bad matchups. I ran into Sandman and 2 lockdown decks, so like the High Evo, Storm, Spider-Man decks, which are really unfavored for Bounce. I managed to win all 3. Mainly because I knew what the win conditions were. And yeah, so you see here I get a huge bonus from playing around the Leader here. And I actually see that my opponent has Galactus, which is pretty important, I think. You don't usually see that in the Sandman deck. So Dracula here comes super clutch. And my opponent actually retreats here, which I think is very wrong, right? You shouldn't be retreating in Infinite Conquest. But it's battle 1, so I guess, and it was like at the last second to last day, so I guess they just wanted to try it again, I guess. We were up by like 6 cubes, so it's very unfavorable for them in general, even if their deck is favored. But yeah, so for like, yeah, so I was talking about the bounce games, right? So for the Sandman versus Bounce game, I remember taking full advantage of the fact of the one game they didn't, the first or second game they didn't have Sandman, and and they just went for a wave on 5, so they snapped me on 5. I assumed they were gonna Sandman or wave, and I played out my whole hand, and it put me in a position, and I snapped back on turn 5. Since I played out my whole hand, I had Mysterio Monkey, and I believe they were all basted, and I was able to win 8 cubes off of the follow-up with Iron Man. And even though my opponent managed to have like Sandman on 3 or 4, like 4 games in a row after that, I was able to retreat for 1 cube or for 2 cubes, depending on how good I felt. And they were actually brought me down to like 4 life, I believe. So they won like 3 in a row before I was able to win a 50-50 off of a Chavez pull at the end there. Similarly, the lockdown decks, I was also very aggressive snapping. Whenever I thought they were going to play Spider-Man or Professor X, I would try and stack that lane and snap aggressively. because you really need to win those cubes, right? But yeah, anyways, going to this game, I don't have the best hand. They've had Quinjet Zabu, Korg, and Nick Fury. I only just had Thor Dracula. I do have Jane to follow up, which is pretty good. And I can fill Mojo World with the Wasp and the Hammers, which is always good. I should also mention this is also a bad matchup for Lockjaw. Rocks in your Lockjaw is never good. But yeah, so they skip here, which I found really weird. I was thinking that they maybe have Infinite for Nick Fury. But it's only for 2 cubes, so I'm definitely going to stay. I'm not in that unfavored position. We're going to have a big Thor. We have potentially a really big Dracula with Hulk and Infinite in hand. And I can fill up Mojo World very easily. Right, so I can empty out everything except for Hulk, Infinite, and Chavez by playing out High Evo and Spider-Ham to fill Mojo World. And actually snap here. Since this beats Infinite, unfortunately, I don't believe they played Infinite here. They actually go for a different line, which surprised me, which was Dino plus She-Hulk. So they're actually a Dino She-Hulk deck, which I've never personally seen before, but it does make some sense if you're running a Moon Girl kind of style deck. And this very much surprised me. Now we're down to a 50-50 on whether or not we hit Hulk, or not even 50-50, sorry, 1 and 3. The only card that I lose with is the Dracula hitting the Chavez. So, which it does, and I lose 4 cubes off the start. Pretty rough. This is where I should talk about mental a little bit. So, you should not be sad if you're losing or upset if you're losing Infinite Conquest. It should be known on average only 1 out of 32 players make it through the entire Conquest on any given run, right? So if you look at it like a bracket of 2 players facing each other at a time, it takes 5 rounds to get a winner, right? Essentially what Infinite Conquest is. It's important to not let location variance tilt you or make you make bad decisions, especially with snapping or not snapping. So it's okay to retreat like 2 to 3 times in a row if you have really bad locations, your opponent gets destroyed stuff. Retreat. Don't get upset. I see lots of people like rage stay in some of these the games that I played, or they just made like decisions kind of seeming like unnatural because of like prior battles in the same mode, right? But whether it's like the opponent got like a random card, or like they made a weird play, or they made a lockjaw flip. But yeah, so here they snap me, but I snap back because we've top decked the Mjolnir, and we have the lockjaw to rotate through, and I'm gonna be able to follow up with Jane as well, right? My entire deck is very good pulls. I still have Hulk and Infinite in there, as well as Magneto. So yeah, I'm able to Jane here to get Wasp and Hammer back, and we'll be in a really good spot, right? Oh yeah, and then the last part of the mental that I want to say, losing 50-50s, losing 1 and 3s, that's gonna happen. Don't let that affect you either. So yeah, I lost to 1-3 there. I still made the right play. I wouldn't change the play I made because of the fact that I lost 1-3. So that's important to do, is to not change your play because of that. But yeah, so here I have priority. I have the Mjolnir and the Wasp. I don't really have follow-up to that, but I do have this random Camp Lehigh Cosmo. They are playing a Zabu deck, so I do think Shang-Chi is pretty likely. So I'm flipping into my deck. I have a 50-50 to hit Hulk or Magneto. If I hit Jubilee, I also have another chance of hitting Hulk or Magneto. And then Wasp Cosmo plus the Mjolnir proc puts me ahead in Kunlun. Right. And then they would need to put 8 power to beat my Jane anyways, so I thought that was fairly unlikely. But yeah, so they stay here. I hit back into Jubilee, which pulls out the Hulk, so now we're fairly ahead mid. And then I have the Cosmo to play on the Kunlun, which actually blocks the Coulson, which is kind of nice. But either way, I don't think the Collector would have been big enough to win mid, but Cosmo, yeah. Also, it's fairly unlikely they played right because they had double Warpaths, right? So yeah, we're able to win our 6 cubes right back, which is really, really good for us, right? When you fall behind, it can be tough to win if your opponent plays passively and doesn't snap you back or similar, right? So yeah, so now we're going into round 3. We actually had 2 very high cube games. If you notice one thing, small thing with this deck, I'm passing on turn 1 with my Spider Ham, so I can make my Hulks bigger, right? In this deck, there's nothing I'm doing on turn 2, so it's always correct to Spider Ham on turn 2. Otherwise, you're just losing 2 power. I should know I really like Spider Ham in this mode because of the fact that there's a lot of like early pool decks or early pool 3 decks that rely, or even just like high rolly decks that rely on like 6 cost cards to put them together. So stuff like Wong on reveal with Odin and Zola, or discard decks really rely on some of these like 6 drops like Apocalypse, and I already said Odin Zola. So I did find Ham really helpful to like try and win these matchups. You notice here I don't snap. I'm ahead, and my opponent has I thought it was a DarkHawk deck. Yeah, what is a DarkHawk deck? DarkHawk is one of the cards. So Rock Slide does make it kind of sketchy, right? I have Lockjaw on 4, so we could very much pull rocks from there, so I didn't want to aggressively snap when I was already ahead. But here I'm going to try and Jubilee and then play the rock, right? So I don't pull a rock with Jubilee. And then hopefully one of those will hit something good. Even Dracula is decent. One reason I really like Dracula, I mentioned that I made the change from Dracula to Killmonger, and then I also put Infinite in over like Odin and Doom, which is normally in here. Having a unit that can't be Shang-Chi'd is really powerful in this deck. It's also something you can consistently play into Storm or into Spider-Man lanes, and it's often very, very difficult for your opponent to judge how much power they need to put into that lane, your Dracula lane, especially since you can reinforce that lane later on with like Travis or Thor or Jane. And it's just it's a very powerful card. It also makes bounce matchup a little bit better since they can't directly count like what's your output ranges, right? And also just in general, you have a higher ceiling by having Infinite in the deck. But yeah, so here we pulled the rock out of Jubilee. Getting Thor out of Lockjaw is not very good. They have the DarkHawk down. I could try and Hulk middle and hope that somehow they don't put enough power in Murder World, but that's very unlikely to ever result in anything good for us. So I take the retreat for 1, and now we move on to the next game. But yeah, to wrap back around to deck building, I think it's important to play good decks in Conquest. Obviously, that should be true even on ladder, but I think especially in Conquest, having a deck that is generally good against all matchups is extremely powerful. You don't want something that's only good versus the meta, I think, right? So if you hard unfavor yourself versus like the average deck, right? Lots of players don't have full collections. Lots of players want to experiment with non-meta stuff. You really shouldn't throw away these games by running a deck that's only good versus bounce and high Evo. What's okay to do is to have a deck, so like my deck, where I believe the only hard counter to my deck is bounce, and then we have 2 kind of soft counters of DarkHawk and Sandman, but we're hedging these by running our Spider Ham and our Draculas, right? So the Spider Ham's also very good in the Saba matchup. We can frequently hit their 4 drops, right? Generally they don't run anything big. It also helps us in bounce by hitting the Iron Man rather frequently, and sometimes Shang-Chi if they're running the more tech version. So that's so yeah, it's worth it to hedge versus these matchups, your bad matchups, but not hard unfavor yourself. One thing I should note here, I did make a misplay by playing Lockjaw left. Since I had Triganto and Titan on the board, I probably should have put Lockjaw on the right and flip into the Lockjaw there, so that I could play Triganto out just for 14. It would be a surprise stats, right? In Conquest, they know my deck, but having something like Triskelion can really help surprise your opponent. But yeah, so I decided to Magneto to try and clog them and Triskelion, but they passed, which means they likely have their She-Hulk. At this point, we know their whole deck except for one card. I'm assuming it's Shang-Chi at this point, but I'm not really 100% sure. It would make sense if they had another 4, though. So I strongly believe that's what it is. I'm trying to guess, since I have priority, I could try and go for Negasonic. But I'm thinking that, for some reason, I'm thinking that they're only going to play one card, right? But likely I should have put the Negasonic mid, since they only had one spot. But yeah. I think I was expecting a Rock Slide for them mid, and to play like just She-Hulk, right? So unfortunately we lose that because of that misplay. That I think is actually a misplay. Because yeah, I shouldn't have just playing it mid was so much better. I note this after, but yeah. So now we're going to high stakes. We're 3-4, which is essentially being 4-4. Both of us essentially have 2 lives left. I guess the difference is that they should actually be snapping me here, so that I would only have 1 life left, right? Since I can't take away 4 cubes from them ever, but they can take away 3 from me in one go, right? So if you're up 4-3, you should always snap on turn 1, because no matter what, you still have 2 rounds to go. But you make your opponent be forced to decide if they only want to have 1 round left. So, right, and so you'll notice for me, I don't snap them for the opposite reason, where me snapping does nothing. No matter what, I'm going to have to play another game. Right? If I take 3 cubes, they're going to be at 1 cube, and it doesn't change anything for me. So I might as well stay and make sure that I don't absolutely low roll everything, right? If they retreat, it's the same as me winning on a snap. So yeah, knowing these kind of breakpoint stuff, I think, is very important. It gives you that little edge, which can mean a lot in close games, right? Obviously, they're at a point. I mean, even if they snap me, it doesn't matter for them at all. They could still snap here, even though I'm high rolling them. So, yeah. But yeah, so that's those are just some tips, and I'll keep going back and probably talking about some more. If I think of some more, I think those are the main ones I want to talk about. Knowing your deck very well, obviously, is also very important. Nothing will beat deck knowledge, knowing your win condition, lose conditions, your matchups. Yeah. Here, I decide not to trust the Dracula and just play out the Hulk. We'll be ahead in every lane. They already have to like gamble the danger room. They actually make the right choice. They don't even retreat here, which is definitely correct for them to do, because no matter what, they have to play out another game, right? So 3 versus 2 cubes doesn't matter when you're at 4 health, right? And high stakes. So they should always be staying. Like, would have had a rock and I discarded the rock with Dracula. Could have lost there. Alright, just grab a drink of water. Yeah, so now, I apologize for that. Now they have 1 life and I have 3, which means I just have to win 1 out of the next 2 games, right? So all I'm trying to do is just make sure that I play appropriately. There's no more retreating, no more snapping. So it's just making the right choices and finding the win condition. That's something else that I think is pretty important. if you're in a position where you have to play the game out, which happens pretty frequently, play around what wins you the game, right? And it sounds super obvious, but a lot of people don't do it. If you can't beat a certain card or cards from your opponent, what you should do is you should beat what else they could possibly have, right? So let's say my opponent's playing Doctor Doom in a Sanctum game, right? And there's no way I can beat this Doctor Doom. I have no way to get into this location. Then I should play as if they're not playing Doctor Doom and play to beat whatever else is in their deck, right? Play to beat their Hulk. Play my Shang-Chi, right? Instead of trying to just give up, basically, right? But yeah, so now going back to this game, we get our ham off on their Dino, which is pretty good. They're passing on 5, which means they're going to try and play She-Hulk here. Fortunately, we hit a rock. I was in between whether or not to chain. I think my issue with the chain was that it made it a 50-50 on whether or not I draw the hammer or the wasp. So I just decided to lockjaw ham, try and hit something big. And we did. We hit most likely they were going to play She-Hulk and Dinosaur. But yeah, so here I'm playing Magneto. This is the one win condition that I see, is pulling everything mid and getting a big Dracula hit. So we managed to pull a Symbiote, Mystique, and the DarkHawk. And so now we're tied, and all I need to do is win tiebreakers. Unfortunately, the only way I won tiebreakers here was by hitting exactly Hulk, which was a 1 in 5. It would have brought us to 30. Actually, no. Nothing. The 30 would not have been enough. For some reason, I thought that 30 was enough here. Yeah, so we had no way of winning there since they just had the Mystique as well. But yeah, so now we're in our last game. Set was very close, but I have Lockjaw Watch Jubilee, so now I'm feeling a lot better. As long as we don't get rock slided on 3, we should be good. I also now can fill the raft, right? I have Lockjaw Wasp into Jubilee. I'm thinking about putting Spider-Ham in there, but then it doesn't give me space to Jubilee, so I believe I just Spider-Man right. I accidentally clicked that out of my hand. But yeah, so they have Collector, not Sabu, and we ham their She-Hulk, which is a very good ham. The She-Hulk was actually really good in their deck. I was actually very impressed by how hard it was to play around in some of these situations, since we don't run any sort of wave tech or anything. But yeah, I think running tech cards is a little bit tricky in Lockjaw, just for that reason that like it makes your Lockjaw high rolls better. If the tech cards aren't useful in the matchups, they're just dead, right? You already have a lot of dead high cost cards usually, so the last thing you want is dead tech cards. You want cards that are always good to play, which is why I really like Dracula and Jubilee. I'm already playing with high Evo in the deck too, right? So it's just too much, I think. But yeah, so we get the Raft card here, so I'm feeling very good. They weren't able to fill. Only way they would have been able to fill is if they had the Korg plus something else, like Zabu or the Mystique. Unfortunately, we hit Null, which is pretty bad, but I'm already thinking about here the Fist Tower and the Magneto, how it pulls a bunch of stuff there, so that potentially could buff up the Null. And yeah, so I'm just going to play Dracula into Fist Tower, right? And then New York's going to allow us to shift all the stuff around, which is awesome since we filled the raft, right? But yeah, Null was definitely a low roll. Usually 0 power. So, but the good thing about Dracula here is we do have Infinite and Hulk in hand. So, and we'll have Chavez. Actually, no, we don't have Chavez. If I drew one of the 0 cost, like the Wasp or the Hammer, we could have emptied out. Fortunately, I draw the Jubilee, which does mean Dracula has 1 bad hit, but I don't think we ever play out the Jubilee here when Magneto is just so good at giving us this null value and destroying their stuff, right? which is very powerful. It means that they also can't play like DarkHawks or anything out in middle or left, since they have priority. So yeah, I decided to fight for all 3 lanes here by playing out the moving the Dracula and Ham over alongside the Lockjaw, and then playing the null middle, try and win middle if they don't move at all. Unfortunately, New York is kind of coin flippy, but they don't have any Zabu or kind of She-Hulk nonsense. So I do think we're almost 100% here, assuming that we can hit the Infinite or the Hulk and not the Jubilee, right? Because then we'll have around 20 power in every lane, or 12 in the Magneto lane. So yeah, my opponent's definitely taking time to think. It's definitely very hard for them, I think, knowing what cards that we have and what we can move around, and the fact that we have a ref card. So yeah, they end up just playing 1 card in Fist Tower, which is the Doctor Doom from Nick Fury. And we kill the stuff, and we win Fist Tower, and as a result, we win the Raft. And we do hit the Jubilee, unfortunately, so we don't get the full casserole, but thankfully, it didn't come out to that Dracula hit. My Dracula hits were pretty bad this series. And yeah, they give some GGs. The GG's back. Definitely one of my hardest fought Infinite Conquest matches, for sure. They definitely played that very well. Their deck was reasonable into ours. The fact that we never saw their last card likely means it was Travis and not Shang-Chi. So I do think we're fortunate for that. Shang-Chi would have been pretty strong versus us. Okay, so now we're going to the 3rd game. And I should say that as well. Don't treat your games differently based on where they are in the Conquest. Always treat them just as seriously this way. And don't get more nervous by the later you get. Like, obviously, this is easy to say as just like watching these games, but like, play your deck to the best of the ability. Don't let your decisions change. Don't be results oriented ever, is my like biggest advice I can give. And yeah, all right, so it looks like they're Thanos, which is always tricky to play around because Thanos can be stones and just a bunch of random cards, right? The fact that they play Daredevil means that they're likely the control version, maybe with Valkyrie and Professor X. We do have Lockjaw Wasp, so I snap. I think it's very powerful to snap this, even with them having potential for tech cards, right? And Thanos, they didn't have Mind Stoned, and even though they played 2 early stones, I think we have to snap aggressively when we have good hands. And we flip Lockjaw into Lady Thor, which is very strong since it's not Shang-Chiable. It does mean that our Thor is not as good, but it's still just a 4 power unit that we can put off to the side. I think it's better than the Polaris and the Shadow King for sure. So yeah, and getting this Wasp value is also very good. And we have the Thanos. Doesn't really give us any more info since they're a Thanos deck, so we know they have it. And here they retreat after the Ham. I guess they retreated because they were pulling it off of the Lockjaw lane. At this point, I'm like, yeah, the opponents. This is how you tell your opponent's probably not that good at snapping and retreating. Is there was no reason for them to retreat there, right? They might as well have stayed and even just not played any cards just to see more of my deck, even if they want to hide info, right? But here I have Lockjaw Wasp again, so snap turn 1. Titan's also very good for us since we have so many 6-drops in our deck. Lockjaw Wasp, I think, is like almost always a turn 1 snap, assuming that your first location you can play the Lockjaw on. Otherwise, I would wait until you see 2 to 3 locations. Here Cosmos flips up, which is awesome for us as well because of the fact that they can't play their stones there. And yeah, so here I'm just trying to decide if I play into the vault or not. Since I wasn't sure if I'm gonna high roll like this Lockjaw and stuff, I decided to play it in Titan. And also the Jane means that I wanted to be able to play the Wasp on the last turn to lock draw. So I played it to the left. And yeah, Thor is one of the best top decks for sure, since we're in a follow-up with Chain. It makes it very difficult for my opponent to win the vault now. But I'm thinking about Profex and Spider-Man here. So I'm trying to decide if I should play in Cosmos, right? But I do have Hulk in hand, and I'll have 0 cost, so I am pretty confident. And with Dracula, I am pretty confident that if I win Vault, I can win Titan. So I decide to just put the J in middle. And if they go for some sort of lockout on Cosmos, I'm just going to go all in on this Titan. But yeah, here they retreat again. And at this point, now that I have this lead, and I know my opponent likes to, I guess, aggressively retreat is the word for it. Now I'm thinking about what I talked about at the beginning of this video, which is trying to extend the games because I believe I'm favored in this matchup. In general, Lockjaw is favored into these kinds of lockdown decks, since you can just put a lot of power before they can lock it down. Unfortunately, here they get Space Stone into the Space Throne in turn 2, and I get the Squirrel into there, so just have to retreat for 1. It's a lockdown deck right there. You're probably going to lock me out of another location, and not much I can do about that. I don't have Jeff or anything to get into there. I don't have Killmonger to clear out those squirrels. So yeah, we're going to here. We had Olympia. Generally better for us than for Thanos, since they're already drawing a lot of cards. We actually get Nova Roma as follow-up, so we are emptying out our deck, which is something to note. We actually don't have very good hits if we were to draw Lockjaw or Jubilee. So I don't mind not drawing here, and just going Thor into Dracula, which is good with all the big cards in hand. And then hopefully getting off just a big Hulk or a good Magneto. And we do get our whole hand buffed a ton, which is very nice here. Yeah, so yeah, I'm deciding to go Thor into Sewer System, just a big thing. I think I was thinking about where I'm putting the Dracula as well, and I was thinking about putting it into Nova Roma, since that's where their Soul Stone is. And I find that to be a very powerful thing to do, is put an unknown amount of power in the lane where I think they want to Profex, which is generally going to be Nova Roma on their Soul Stone path. We do top deck this Mjolnir, which is kind of insane as well. Because of that, I actually play the high Evo here, since I am almost guaranteed to play the Dracula next turn, get the soak for the Hulk, and then play Hammer Hulk on the last turn, and this 3-power Wasp. They actually snap me here. I'm assuming it's because of a Profex or Spider-Man line. However, I'm just pretty confident in this Dracula and 20-power Hulk that I'm going to have. They don't have activated Thanos, and I also have a 3-power Wasp that minuses 2 for my opponent, which is essentially 5 power. So like on the last turn, I'm putting out 25, 31 power with the Mjolnir. That can't be Shang-Chi'd. They do have Juggernaut, is something that I've seen from their deck. I only know 3 cards actually from their deck, which is Daredevil, Juggernaut, and Polaris. So that's something I'm thinking about as well. But I'm pretty confident in this Daredevil. We're already ahead, so I'm willing to bet 2 to 4 cubes on this. So yeah, they do go for the 5-power Profex on the right, which I find pretty fine. It does make my decision now kind of hard. Now I'm trying to figure out, now their Juggernaut is not that good, right? Because of the fact that Dracula could hit a good card, which is why I'm actually, you see this play looks kind of weird. I'm emptying out all the low power cards in my hand in order to beat a Juggernaut mid. Right, so Juggernaut mid would put them to 9, and as long as I don't hit Chavez, we'd win that lane. And the Wasp would actually subtract power, so even if I hit Travis, it would win as long as I play the Wasp middle. But yeah, so then one thing I realized is how I could just do this on the left and fill left, possibly, and play the Wasp here. This does lose to Jug though. So yeah, I actually made a mistake with Prio here, but they actually end up playing the Devil Dino over to the left and not playing for mid in the Draco lane, which is probably the correct play from their line. And now we Jubilee into the drain, and the hammer gives us enough power to win the sewer system. One thing should be noted here with ordering, I played Jubilee then hammer because there's also a lockjaw in my deck. So if I pulled the lockjaw, I could flip the hammer into the chain, which would also win me the game. Basically, the only line that was losing me there was Jubilee into Spider-Ham or Jubilee into Lockjaw and flipping the Mjolnir into Spider-Ham. So definitely worth 4 cubes considering we're ahead. Now they're on 2 life, we're on 9. We would have to lose 5 games in a row to lose this set. And every game gets played out. So we're just going to play to our win conditions every game. And we should be able to close out a game. Yeah. As long as we make sure, like, I think the biggest thing that I realized while playing is that with the decks I'm comfortable with, which also happen to be some of the best decks in the format, Lockjaw and Bounce, granted, when I played them the most was with like Thanos Lockjaw stuff, was one of my favorite things to play, and was the DinoHawk Bounce, but they're very similar decks. Right now one's High Evo, now one's a Kitty Pride deck. I really think understanding the deck is very important. So it needs to be good, and it needs to be good, and you need to be comfortable on it. But yeah, so here we went for Dracula and Space Throne. I was kind of expecting them to do like a Jug, or I'm actually kind of expecting them to have a Green Goblin in their deck. So I just played Dracula and Space Throne. It's kind of hard for them to play around it. Playing Chain and Wasp here. Not sure why I'm playing out the Wasp here, to be honest. I think it might have been to play around Spider-Man. Yeah, I think I'm playing around Spider-Man here. So they would have to put more pressure there. But yeah, so they play Polaris and Dracula lane. So now I'm thinking like, oh, okay, so as long as I empty it out, I'll have a 3 out of 4 chance for the Dracula to hit something big enough to win there. And I'm just trying to figure out where I should be going for. I decide to go for mid. You notice once again that I'm playing Jubilee into the hammer just in case I hit the Lockjaw. We do hit Ham instead, but as long as we don't hit High Evo, we're winning here. And we hit Travis, perfect. We win it, 9-0. It's a good win for us. Doesn't always feel satisfying being someone that's not playing optimally, but after the very close round 2 that we had, where our opponent was playing very well, definitely a relief to see that we were able to crush our opponent. Okay, so now we're at 3 in a row, and I'm pretty happy that I haven't seen any bounce, which I believe is the biggest counter to this deck. But now that we're going to round 4 and 5, right, we're going to be going against opponents who are also 4-0 and also 5-0, and we're facing Moose, who's someone I actually have seen play on other people's streams, and I think I've played before on ladder. So I know they're pretty good at this game, and they might be playing something else top tier. But we do have a Spider-Ham early on, try and get some information. Throne Room is very good for our deck. She-Hulk, so now I'm thinking there's some sort of High Evo deck maybe, maybe some sort of double up deck. Does roll Lamentus. We honestly don't have a bad hand for Lamentus. We have a guaranteed Thor Hammer, and we have Hulk. We have Dracula to potentially hit Hulk or Magneto. We're almost guaranteed to win Throne Room with this hand, right? having Wasp is also good. It always gives you some leverage in these games where you're emptying out your hand. So they snap me. Especially since we hit the She-Hulk, which I should also say could also mean Shuri. I'm pretty confident to stay with just Thor. So at least to figure out what they're playing. Worst case, I can retreat later on. So yeah, I play out the Thor. And turns out they're actually Patriot, which is very intriguing. They're playing some sort of She-Hulk Patriot deck. And here I'm just looking to soak the Hulk, since Patriot can generally stack a ton of power, right? So I'm going to go Lockjaw into Dracula into Hulk. This is my plan here. And like right Mjolnir Wasp all together. But yeah, Patriot is pretty scary. Not as scary as it used to be because this deck cannot power it. What is scary about Patriot is that they run a lot of tech cards. Like they can run Waves, they can run Killmongers, they can run Shang-Chi's, they can run Valkyrie. Each list is kind of unique to the player's preferences. But yeah, they have Patriot Mystique, which is very scary. I'm pretty confident we were in Throne Room. I'm just trying to figure out if I should be Draculaing in my Thor lane or in its own lane. And it really depends if I'm looking to play around Ultron or not, right? Or Doom. I should also note that... What was I going to note? But yeah, it looks like they're just a low to the ground Patriot list. They play Debris and Squirrel Girl. Most likely, this means no Ultron. And yeah, so we're just going to play the 20 power Hulk. The most they can add to Lamentus, right, is with like a blue Marvel maybe. And I don't think there's any way they beat me in Throne Room. There's no way they could Shang-Chi me without priority. Even if they... Yeah, there's just nothing they can do here, since they closed off themselves on Lamentus. So I decided to stay here and not snap back, purely to try and win. I think if I snap here, they always leave. So I'm trying to be surprising by not snapping and maybe make them think that I'm retreating later, so that I can get these 2 extra cubes, since I think I'm like guaranteed the win. And yeah, so they only play the Pig and the Wasp, and I just play the Hulk and Hammer. And we take the 4, which I think is very strong here in this matchup that I'm not too familiar with. So we even hit the Magneto mid. But yeah, so here I'm just trying to figure out what this She-Hulk means. Most likely it means they're just trying to explode on the last turn, right? Do some sort of passing and then She-Hulk plus like debris and stuff. But most likely it means they're unlikely to have Ultron and Doom. That's something I'm keeping in mind too. Or if they do, it's probably only one of them. Oh, yeah, the point I wanted to make earlier... The bad thing about Patriot as well is that you can counter it by doing math. So you can just count like how big their Ultrons or Dooms are going to be, and you can retreat or beat that appropriately, right? Sometimes you'll have to make it a 50-50, but it's a lot more telegraphed than a deck like Bounce, where they can... You don't. It's really hard to calculate what's basted, what's in their hand, right? You don't know... Maybe you've seen like 1 or 2 cards on the board, but you don't know where they're going to drop anything, right? It's not like they played out Patriot and Mystique in the lane and then you know that they can't Ultron a different lane, right? I am here being really clutch in this matchup again, hitting She-Hulk. But we don't have a 3 play or really a 4 play, so definitely can't snap here. They also have Patriot, which buffs Ninja and Rock. And we draw Jubilee, which is a good draw. Our deck is pretty good. The worst hit would be Lockjaw, and even then, Wasp into Drain would be reasonable. They play Patriot Mystique, separate lanes. Once again, makes me think that probably not an Ultron deck. Usually you'd want to stack them all together if you're an Ultron deck. But yeah, so now we have Dracula, which means I want to play Infinite over Jane, I think, so that we can buff up our Hulk. And then maybe we go Jane or Magneto next turn and Wasp and just try and get a big Dracula hit. I do flip here. Oh, okay, I think I'm saying that 18 power Hulk is big enough. And the difference of Jane being 8 or High Evo being 4, right? I would be getting 2 more power on Hulk, but I'm sacrificing 4 power on the Jane. So yeah, that's why I changed my mind here. But yeah, they have Patriot, Mystique, and Blue Marvel. Anything they play has that doesn't have text is +5. So I'm trying to think, like, is there a way that I win here? And the only way that I see is by playing out the Hulk and Wasp and hitting Infinite off of Dracula. So I decided to play it safe. And similarly to last time, I think my opponent's not snapping because they think I'll retreat. So rather than stay and give them the extra cube, I am just going to leave. I should leave. I'm considering this Magneto. Am I staying here? I don't remember this game, to be honest. No, okay, I leave. That would be a very bold stay, I think. Because that play loses to so many things that I already saw from their deck, like Squirrel Girl and Debris. Especially since they have priority, I'm not even guaranteed the move. Right, they could fill up all the board. So yeah, I decided just to give them 1 cube here. Especially with decks like Patriot and Hela. I think it's very powerful to leave when they have the stuff that they need to do early, right? So they have their early Invisible Woman, or they have their early Patriot, especially in low stakes, right? For 1 cube. Very powerful to that. Here we have a good ham. I have the ham, I have the Lockjaw, I have the Dracula. I have the Jane, which is good too if I can get Thor. So I believe I'll snap here if I draw Wasp or Thor. Is what I was already thinking about. One thing that's a little bit scary is X-Mansion. Because that could destroy us, right? But yeah, since we have Bifrost, I kind of want to see the last location before snapping. But I also missed playing the ham here because I'm saving it to throw into the Lockjaw. I'm planning on going Thor into Lockjaw ham, into Dracula or Lady Thor. Likely depending on what I roll out of the Lockjaw. Right, so if I roll the hammer out, I'm probably not gonna play the chain. Yeah, so they play Stand Shocker, so like I said before, it does look like they're low to the ground Lockjaw list. We do draw the Wasp, which leads to me to snap. Right. This could force a retreat before the X-Mansion flip, which would be very powerful. Otherwise, we get Lockjaw Wasp into Ham Thor, into Jane, which is very powerful, even if we lose this X-Mansion. So yeah, they pull out Strange, pulls a Shocker, which is fine for us. Just moving some power, and then we pull Mojo in that lane, which honestly is pretty good in their Flood deck. It means that it's honestly like an 8-power unit, especially since Subterranea flips. It does make Subterranea flipping does suck for our Lockjaw, but if we can fill mid, I'm pretty confident we win it. I have the Jane here to pull the hammer. Dracula, they do play Debris, which floods us, but it is also good for our Mojo. But I'm kind of relying on something big flipping out, and we get this Infinite, which is insane. It means I have to commit a lot to win that lane. Actually, it just straight up means they lose that lane to the Subterranea. Honestly, even if we didn't roll that, we were winning that lane, except to Blue Marvel. But yeah, so now I'm just going Jane, and I'm like, all right, now I just need to win mid, right? Since they're clogged on both sides, all they can do is give buffs. And really, the most buffs they can do is like Blue Marvel into Mystique. Right, those are 2 cards that we've seen already. That wouldn't be enough to win Subterranea, but it would be enough to win Bifrost, assuming we don't put something big there. But the biggest things that we can do is go Hammer into Chavez. They do just play Wasp here, which I thought was kind of weird. But then I realized, oh, they're running the She-Hulk stuff, so they're probably just hiding what they're doing. One thing I forgot about is that Chavez was pulled out of the Lockjaw already. So I actually didn't have Chavez for Bifrost. So the biggest thing I can do there is put a Wasp, which does activate Mojo, and we do have the Hammer for Thor. And we could even hit Magneto to pull off Strange from mid, right? So I'm definitely staying here, right? We're in the advantage. If they want to play buff cards like Blue Marvel, we're winning left side. So yeah, they just retreat. So now we're going to round 4. We're up 9-4. Very, very strong for us. We have Lockjaw Wasp again, but we do have Space Throne, so you'll notice I wait here to see if I have a place to play this Lockjaw Wasp, right? If it ends up being Space Throne, Sanctum, and like miniaturized lab, we can't play, right? So I'm just waiting to see if I have a place to put this Lockjaw before I snap. We get New York, which is okay. One thing I realized when I was playing here, and I snap, but one thing I realized after I snapped is that they run Debris. But we do have New York, so I'm not super worried about that. As long as the last location we can play Lockjaw in, I actually don't need to fill Space Throne. Since I can always just move out of New York. They haven't shown a way to destroy it yet. So I could always move right the rock into New York. So we're just deciding to flip the Lockjaw. And get the little Mojo World animation again. And we roll Jane, which is very nice. It does make the Thor a little bit weaker, but it does mean that we get to roll again into Mojo World. And eventually we will get to move stuff off of New York, right? I'm deciding to play off curve here, right? To buff the Hulk, we'll go Thor into Dracula. I don't have any other 5-drop. I'm playing with on turn 5, right? Dracula is likely always better than playing Jubilee at this point, since most of my big cards are in my hand, as opposed to being in my deck. Roll high Evo, which is still fine. Right, we don't have to super high roll, we just have to fill there and try and outpower them elsewhere. They do Patriot Mystique, which is definitely very strong, but it's very hard for them to fight for Space Throne, right? So yeah, we top deck the Mjolnir, which is awesome. We get to shuffle into the deck, and Dracula, and then we'll get to move stuff off of Mojo World. I have Magneto even to move Patriot off of Mojo World and just forcibly win there. As long as we don't go to tiebreakers, I would be very favored, right? Or as long as we don't lose middle and Space Throne, we'd be very good, right? It does look like they're starting to fill middle, which is definitely the correct call for them. We hit Chavez, which was our best hit in the deck. They play Cosmo, which means now we can't Magneto anywhere but Space Throne. But we just have like the nuts, right? We can guarantee 20 power on our Dracula by playing out Magneto Wasp. And they also need to fill Mojo World, right? Since I have priority, I can pull Mystique, Patriot, or Cosmo into Space Throne before they play out. Like, I'm expecting Ultron plus Wasp on Mojo World as a potential option. So I'm just putting a lot of power mid and saying that there's no way they can beat me with one card in Space Throne. And yeah, we pull the Patriot there, which guarantees the win there. We have more cards than them in Mojo World, and we're going to end up with like 39 power mid. I'm actually surprised they stayed here for 4. This, I think, was probably a tilt stay out. We even re-hit the hammer. Yeah, I don't think this was ever winning for them. And we have 45 power in it. And this is one of the strengths of the decks, right? If you get your high roll, like even Bounce is going to have some trouble against this. Unless they can perfectly guess that you're going to get this 45 power. But yeah, so we managed to close that out fairly easily. 9-0 again. Even though I do think it was a little bit of a difficult matchup on paper. In practice, we were able to just outsnap them. And honestly, I think we had the most high rolls out of any of our battles this run in that match. So that definitely helped. Now we're going to 5. You'll notice I take a little bit more of a break before jumping in. This is because, well, 1, I need to decide another avatar. I had no clue what I wanted to run. And 2, I was just trying to think a little bit about like just trying to mentally reset, right? So here I believe I'm just trying to decide. I already have default in the Antral, Hero Antral avatar, which is the avatar I use all the time. And I believe I'm looking for the Sera one. Here, I can skip the head of this. All right. All right, there we go. I ended up picking DinoHawk, which was an avatar that I used all the time before December when I unlocked the hero stuff. All right, so going into round 5, we're playing Citrus. See Washington, D.C. We have an okay hand. And it's also Nexus mid, which is interesting as well. They snap me here. Unless my hand is unplayable or the locations are unplayable, I almost never treat a turn 1 or 2 snap, especially before my opponent shows me their hand. Here they play out Goose, which is actually very annoying, but Bifrost shows up, which does mean that stuff will get shifted. We could also still draw our Lockjaw or Thor, which would help win there. They play Storm, so now I'm thinking, okay, they're either Cerebro 2 or they're Surfer. Since we hit Sera with a ham, I know there's Cerebro 2. Or not Cerebro 2, I know there's Surfer. However, tricky part is we can't really get a Nexus, but I'm already committed for 2 cubes, so I might as well see maybe we can try for like some loose Nexus win game lines. I go Jubilee Wasp, maybe I hit Lockjaw, right? So I should play Wasp second there always. They go Brood and Nova. And I roll the Dracula there, which is actually really strong. And we get the little Wasp. And I'm just going to play out the Jane here. I'm just trying to see more of their deck at this point. The odds of me winning are very, very low because I can never fight for middle. We get to see that they have Rogue, which technically can steal our Hulk. Doesn't really do much besides just make our Hulk 12. And yeah, you notice I go for the immediate retreat later. There's just nothing I can do to get power into Nexus. My last 2 cards in my deck are Lockjaw and Thor, which are the 2 ways I can get in. But yeah. But now I know their deck, right? Now I know their Silver Surfer. I have a good idea of what tech cards they run. I saw the Sera. And I can pretty much guess that, right? They have Surfer, they have Maximus, they probably have Juggernaut. As long as I play around all of those cards, we should be good. Ham is honestly going to do a lot of work here, I think, because of the fact that if they don't have Sera in hand, it's always going to hit a 3-drop. So, right, so here we hit Storm. Honestly, hitting Storm is not that good because putting Dracula in their Storm lane is very powerful. We flip a Limbo, which we know they can't turn off of Storm now since we hit the Storm. But the fact that they have Luke Cage, so originally my plan here was to play Dracula into Quantum Realm, since Dracula would set his power at the end of the game. But since they have Luke Cage, Brood there, it's a little bit more sketchy. So I decided to just Thor early to just keep Hulk, get Hulk bigger, right? And then maybe I'll go like Dracula Chain into Hulk Infinite. Maybe Infinite off Dracula, right? But this is kind of a hard situation to be in. Yeah, we see the Maximus here. But I do have this Magneto, which is very good in this matchup because of the fact that I can move their power unexpectedly, right? Surfers are really reliant on all these 3 drops, right? Okay, so they snap me here, and now I'm trying to just think. And then one thing I realized is that as soon as I play this Dracula, they're just gonna fill my hand with garbage from Machine World, and there's a very low chance that I'm gonna win Machine World or win Quantum Realm, right? So now I'm thinking about, can I win Machine World maybe instead by just going like Chain into Hulk into Magneto maybe. So that's what I'm considering here. But it's just too awkward to go the Dracula game plan when Machine World is on the board, right? So I decide to go, yeah, they end up goosing me here, which is very annoying. I decide to go for the Chain. And they actually filled my hand, which denied me the hammer as well, which is very annoying. And I'm like, oh, I should have played the Wasp in order to give myself that hand space that I needed, right? But yeah, I think I still didn't realize that this Dracula was essentially useless. So I'm playing it out here, but now I'm like, oh wait, they're just gonna keep giving me bad cards, right? So rather than being like a 50-50 or similar, it's gonna be like a 1 and 2 out of 5 or something, right? And they're playing Sera too, which means they can play 3 drops. I know 2 drop. I even give them a goose, which they can give back to me. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I think this is game now. And honestly, at this point, I was getting a little bit upset at myself for staying originally. Like on their original stop, I likely should have left for 1 here. But I think it's important to realize that just because I stayed on the snap doesn't mean I need to stay in and give them 2 more cubes, even though it's unfavorable. I'm thinking about this Wasp, but then I think I realized as well that it doesn't actually do the pew pew because they are Luke Cage gamers. And this is the highest chance I can give my Dracula to hit a 20 power. So this would be the 50-50 that I would go for, since I'm guaranteed a Chavez or a hammer. Or a hammer, right? If I pull Lockjaw, it'll flip into one of them. But then I realized it's not a 50-50 because they're going to give me 2 cards of Machine World, right? Likely one will be Goose and one will be something else that's like 2 power. So it would be like a 1 and 3, which would not be good, right? So I do think I like to play out 50-50s. I do think that this matchup is favored, so I'm definitely more prone to leaving on 50-50s, but that was less than a 50-50, so you should always leave if it's a very low % chance that you get something good off. But here I finally draw the Lockjaw Wasp. I don't have a good place to play it yet, but I just go for the snap. Especially with the ham as a follow-up, as a backup. Like, great, I get to play ham on 2, I get to play Lockjaw Wasp. One of the best things I can be doing. We got Limbo, which is generally better for us than their deck. We draw High Evo, which honestly isn't even that bad. It makes our Lockjaw rolls a lot better. But I believe I hold the ham here, or do I play it? I'm thinking about holding it for Lockjaw versus playing Evo. Yeah, so I end up holding it for the Lockjaw. And the last location is Sakar, which is also great for us. We have Infinite and Hulk in hand. 50-50 to pull one of those. It does make me kind of sad I didn't play the ham out. And then they actually make a really good read here, and they drug me out of Limbo. Thankfully, we get the Hulk out of Sakar. But yeah, they drugged me, luckily, into Oscorp Tower. Thankfully, there's the interaction with Lockjaw where if you move both cards off of a location, you don't get the shuffle. So they didn't get a random big card from my deck. And I actually stay here because we got the Hulk flip, and since we have Limbo, I'm pretty confident we can win. They do shuffle the Silver Surfer, which is very strong for them. But they're almost clogging themselves on Oscorp Tower, right? So I am noting that. And I'm playing high Evo to make my Hulk bigger. And they play out Nova into the lock draw. We killed their Killmonger, so they don't have any other way to proc the Nova. They hit Surfer again. Honestly, I'm getting kind of tilted here that they're getting so lucky. But now they're locked out, right, of Oscorp. They don't have any way to add power there without the Nova and Killmonger, right? Killmonger got hammed. Maybe they could have Fantastic. The other thing I realized is that now I know their entire deck list, right? And two of the cards, right, they haven't played is Storm, one of them possibly. And they actually decide to storm the Limbo. However, this does not win them the game because I have Magneto for Oscorp. So I managed to pull out the 6 cubes there, which is huge considering I was behind 6-10. And now I'm ahead 6-4. So yeah, I made a big call there that they're going to storm. I think it was honestly one of the only things that they could do. And unfortunately, we get an anticlimactic ending where my opponent rage quits. I think they just closed off whatever phone they were on because they lost to the storm scam. So it is a little anticlimactic. I do think that we would have closed that game out anyways with that big comeback 6 cuber. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed these games. I enjoyed casting, not really casting because it's my own game, self-casting, sure. And I hope that these tips help you in your own Infinite Conquest this month, and even just your general gold or silver conquest. And yeah, just don't take it too harsh, right? The biggest thing is we play games for fun. This is the more competitive mode, but it doesn't have to be, right? You can just stick to Proven Grounds or just play fun decks and not worry about losing, right? So I think that's very important for me to note that. Just because other people are getting infinite borders and stuff, like I said, only 132 players get it on average. And there's a lot of matchup variance. There's a lot of player variance, right? There's no MMR in this. So you could be playing a lot worse or a lot better players than you normally play against, right? Or players with like all the cards, or you could be playing against players with no cards, like in Pool 1, right? So similarly, your deck matchups can be bad, your RNG can be bad. You kind of need a lot of things to go right? All I can give you is the ability to play your best and choose like good decks. So that's what I'll do, and I hope that will increase your percentage points enough up so that you can win your conquest. But yeah, I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a good one.